There's a moment the narcissist never imagines will come. And what's fascinating is, it doesn't happen when you say goodbye or explode in anger. Quite the opposite. It arrives in absolute silence when you simply stop caring. It's not a dramatic scene filled with tears or a heated argument. It's just emptiness, that space where you no longer care what they say, what they do, or what they think about you. The truth is, narcissists aren't really afraid of being hated or criticized. They're not even afraid of being exposed. What terrifies them most is indifference. Because in their world, every reaction you give, whether love or rage, is fuel for their fragile ego. You cried for them. You tried to understand them. You hoped that if you were good enough, they'd change. To them, none of that was love. It was proof they still lived rent-free in your mind. That's why, when you stop caring, everything begins to crumble. You're no longer arguing to prove your point. You're no longer waiting for an apology. You're no longer scanning for those tiny signs of change. You just feel nothing. And for a narcissist, that's like a sledgehammer hitting the core of an identity built entirely on controlling others. They survive off the way you look at them, off your emotional reactions. You are the mirror, reflecting the image they want to believe in. But when that mirror disappears, they don't just lose a relationship, they lose the illusion that gave them a sense of worth. That's when they start to panic and wonder, who am I if no one reacts to me anymore? Here's the thing, for a narcissist, even anger is still a connection. Even leaving in tears convinces them you still care. But when you go silent, when they send signals and nothing comes back, when their name no longer makes your heart race or ache to them, that's not an ending. That's total erasure. In this video, we'll dive into what happens next, the 8 psychological stages a narcissist goes through when they realize you've truly let go. From denial to desperate attempts to regain control, to spiraling into rage, rewriting the story, and finally the quiet collapse. Not to gloat, not for revenge, but to understand this truth: you don't win by fighting. You win by no longer belonging to them. And that moment, the moment you genuinely don't care anymore, that's freedom. Stage 1. Denial. When a narcissist realizes you no longer care, their first reaction isn't grief or regret like a normal person. Instead, they enter a state we call denial of reality. To them, your silence isn't the truth, it's just a temporary tactic, a little game to test them. In their mind, you're still there, waiting for them to come back, craving an explanation or a sign of remorse. Silence, to them, cannot be the end. It's just a move in the game they believe they still control. Remember this, narcissists are never used to being left behind. Their entire mental framework is built on the belief that they're special, irresistible, and always needed. So when you pull away without creating any drama, it throws them off balance. They start convincing themselves you haven't really let go. She's just mad, or he's probably testing how much I care. These thoughts become the shield protecting their fragile ego from the truth that they no longer have any hold over you. And in this denial stage, you'll notice familiar signs. They might post a cryptic photo on social media with a vague caption, or send a simple text like "just checking in." Sounds harmless, but in reality it's a test. They're trying to measure your reaction, because every response, even the coldest one, is proof they still occupy space in your mind. Here's the thing, deep down, they're not acting out of love. They're acting out of fear of being erased from the story. They need to know you still have a little anger, a little regret, or at least a spark of resistance. Because for a narcissist, your presence in the game matters more than anything else. When you react, they exist. When you go silent, they start to disappear. But what they didn't anticipate is that this time you're different. You're not silent to punish them. You're silent because you've let go. You're not rereading old messages, not searching for signals, not waiting for an explanation. And that piece, the one you paid for with so much past pain, is exactly what confuses them the most. The moment they realize every signal vanishes into a void, the shell of denial begins to crack. They can't cling forever to the illusion that you're still there, quietly waiting. And that's when the next stage arrives, a stage where they'll no longer just challenge reality, but start fighting to regain control at any cost. Stage 2. Reasserting control. When the first signals vanish into silence and the shell of denial begins to crack, the narcissist shifts to a familiar tactic: reclaiming control. For them, you're stepping out of their emotional orbit feels like creating a dangerous void, a space they can't reach. And that terrifies them. In the narcissist's world, nothing is scarier than losing the ability to manipulate the emotions of someone who once fueled their ego. At this stage, you'll see a wave of calculated moves. At first, they'll try the old tricks that once softened your heart: sweet messages, unexpected apologies, or stories that revive your best memories together. They'll paint themselves as a changed person, someone who has learned their lesson and wants a fresh start. To a normal person, this might look like genuine remorse. But to a narcissist, it's just a tool, a way to pull you back into the old cycle. What makes this stage dangerous is how quickly their attitude can shift. If sweetness doesn't work, they'll slip into another role, the victim. Suddenly, you'll hear lines dripping with self-pity, like "I've lost everything since you left," or "No one understands me the way you do." These words don't come from love, they come from fear of being erased from your mind. They know how to prey on your empathy, because that's what kept you around longer than you should have stayed. But if both roles, the remorseful partner and the helpless victim, fail, they'll swing to the opposite extreme, applying emotional pressure. You might hear accusations like "You're so cruel," or "I can't believe you can be this cold." Every jab is designed to spark guilt in you, hoping it drags you back into their web to explain or make things right. They don't care if you come back out of love or out of pity, as long as you react, because in their eyes, a reaction means they still matter. This time, though, everything is different. You're no longer being dragged around by that emotional chaos. You've realized that love is not a battlefield where you prove your worth, and happiness doesn't come from fixing someone who refuses to change. So you remain silent, not to punish, but because you finally found the peace they could never give you. And that calm, it pushes them into deeper turmoil than ever before. When all their old tricks stop working, they're forced to face a truth they've been avoiding. The power they once held is gone. And from here, that sense of helplessness will quickly ignite into something far stronger: rage. The stage that marks the next chapter in their collapse. Stage 3. Rage. When every attempt to pull you back falls into the void, when sweet words, victim playing, and their usual emotional games no longer work, the narcissist enters a new emotional territory: rage. But this isn't the kind of anger you've seen before. It's not just frustration over losing a relationship. This is fury born from a loss of power, the very power they believed they would never lose. In their mind, the question isn't, "Why did you leave?" It's, "How dare you not need me anymore?" Your independence isn't viewed as a personal decision. In their eyes, it's an act of rebellion. It shatters the illusion they've lived with for so long, the illusion that they've always been the center of your world, that you would forever orbit around them, whether in love or in anger. When you go silent, when you no longer react, it feels like you're erasing the power they considered their birthright. This rage can surface in two ways. Some will explode openly: angry texts, venomous words, even pressure tactics. But most narcissists take a more covert route. They'll try to destroy your image with rumors, cast themselves as the victim to others, spinning a story where you're the villain and they're the wounded soul. The goal isn't to bring you back, it's to protect their image in front of others, and more importantly, in front of themselves. Because if they can't control you, at least they can control the narrative. But even as they scramble to smear or manipulate public perception, inside them rages a real storm. They feel helpless when every move is met with nothingness. Before, just one cold glance, one short reply, was enough to reassure them they still lived in your mind. But now, there's only silence. And silence for a narcissist isn't just the absence of sound, it's proof they've lost their power. This is when the rage peaks. They may resort to reckless behavior, make dramatic public statements, or spiral into self-destructive acts, just to prove they're still special. And yet, no matter what they do, one truth remains unchanged: you don't care anymore. And that makes every effort meaningless. When they finally realize that even rage can't pull you back, this fire will begin to die out, giving way to a new, more calculated strategy, rewriting the entire story in a way that allows them to keep believing their own illusion. And that brings us to the next stage in their collapse. Stage 4. Rewriting the narrative. When the rage cools and every attempt to regain control fails, the narcissist turns to a different tactic: rewriting the story. This is how they rescue a collapsing ego, because the truth that you don't care anymore is far too painful to accept. And if they can't change reality, they'll change the story about reality. This isn't new. In a narcissist's world, truth has never mattered. The only thing that matters is the image they've built, a flawless image that can't be hurt, always admired, always in control. So when you walk away peacefully, they can't allow the story to end on your terms. They need a different script, one where they're still the main character and you become the villain. And so the narrative is rewritten. You were so cold, you betrayed me, you were always selfish. Everything you ever did, even the times you forgave, endured, and sacrificed gets twisted. In this new version, they're no longer the one who caused pain, but the one who loved deeply and was left behind. All of it serves one purpose, protecting their sense that they never truly failed. Why do they do this? Not to get revenge. Not because they genuinely believe you're the bad guy. They do it for one simple reason: survival. Because when you stop caring, when you stop reacting, they feel like they're disappearing. And to avoid that feeling, they have to create a new reality, a world where you're wrong, so they can keep believing they still matter. You'll notice this stage through subtle signs, rumors spreading through mutual friends, cryptic social media posts, little comments meant to spark doubt about you. Every move is designed not just to shape how others see you, but to convince themselves they're still the victim in this story. What's interesting is that, in the past, these accusations might have crushed you. They might have dragged you into the exhausting spiral of defending yourself, explaining yourself. But this time, you don't react. You've learned that truth doesn't need an audience. You know you gave your best, and now you choose peace over arguments. And once again, that silence confuses and frustrates them, because they've not only lost control over you, but also the stage where they could keep performing their drama. And when their rewritten story no longer shakes you, when every fabricated script fails to hide the emptiness inside, one brutal reality begins to surface. They have no one left to reflect their image back to them. And that's when the next stage crashes in, the stage where emptiness becomes their greatest nightmare. Stage 5. Emptiness. After trying everything to regain control, pleading, playing the victim, exploding in anger, even rewriting the story, the narcissist is left to face the one truth they've been avoiding: you don't care anymore. And when there's no reaction, no gaze, no one there to validate their worth, they fall into the most terrifying void of all, emptiness. For most people, a breakup can be painful, but they still have an inner foundation to lean on: self-awareness, self-respect, a sense of identity. But narcissists are different. Their sense of self was never built from within. It was built from reflection through how others see them, through admiration, attention, even arguments. Every emotion you gave them, whether positive or negative, was proof they still existed in your mind. Now, when you're completely silent, their world feels like it's been drained of air. This emptiness isn't just loneliness, it's an identity crisis. They begin to feel invisible. No one cares about the story they crafted. No one is arguing or trying to understand them. The tricks that once worked are now useless. And the worst part? They don't know who they are when they can't control someone else's emotions. In this stage, you might see them act out in strange ways, diving into shallow pleasures, spending impulsively, or flaunting an exaggerated image of a happy life. But all of it is just an attempt to fill the massive void inside. And nothing works because that emptiness isn't out there, it's within them, and they lost the ability to face it a long time ago. This is also when many people mistakenly believe the narcissist has moved on or found happiness with someone new. They might appear with a new partner, smiling brightly on social media. But behind that smile is panic. The new person isn't a healthy relationship, they're just a replacement mirror. And when that mirror doesn't reflect enough, the emptiness comes roaring back deeper than before. The most painful thing for a narcissist isn't losing you. It's losing the role you played in their life, the role of keeping the illusion alive that they mattered. And when that illusion shatters, they're forced to face the question they never wanted to ask: who am I, if no one is looking at me? That emptiness will drive them toward a desperate choice, finding another source of supply to feel real again. And that leads to the next stage, the endless hunt. Not for love, but because they cannot bear the silence within their own soul. Stage 6. Searching for a replacement. When the emptiness inside becomes too much to bear, the narcissist does what they've always done whenever they feel hollow. They go hunting for a new source of supply. But don't mistake this for moving on or forgetting you. In reality, their rush into a new relationship only reflects their deepest fear, the fear of being alone with themselves. To them, your silence feels like a shattered mirror, and to patch that loss, they need another mirror, a new person who can reflect back the image they crave: attractive, powerful, important. This isn't love. It's an unspoken contract that the new person doesn't even know exists, a role in the script the narcissist is desperately trying to keep alive to hide the truth that inside them is a bottomless void. So you'll see them dive headfirst into new relationships at lightning speed. They'll flaunt it on social media, hand-in-hand photos, public declarations of love, cryptic captions about happiness. Every post is crafted not just to fool others, but more importantly to fool themselves. Because deep down they know the one person who saw through the cracks in their mask, you will never believe this performance again. But no matter how hard they try, the truth remains: the new person isn't you. The new person doesn't know them as deeply as you did. The new person doesn't see the fragile pieces behind that arrogant mask. And so, even as they smile wide in those photos, an unsettling question keeps echoing in their mind. Will this person make me feel real like before? The answer is almost always no, because the problem was never you, and it's not the new person either. The problem is that a narcissist doesn't know how to exist without someone else reflecting their worth back at them. So even when they find someone willing to play the mirror role, they still feel something missing. Missing the patience you once had. Missing the understanding you once gave. Missing the feeling of being truly seen, something you did, and they lost. This comparison makes you, even after you've walked away, linger like a ghost in their mind. Not because they still love you, but because you represent the one thing they crave, yet can never hold on to, someone who saw their real self and stayed. But no matter how many replacements they chase, the emptiness doesn't disappear, because no one can fill a bottomless pit, and no one can heal a soul that refuses to look inward. When those patchwork relationships inevitably fall apart, when the performance loses its audience, they'll finally face what they've feared most: the collapse of their own identity. And that brings us to the next stage. Stage 7, ego collapse. When replacement relationships stop giving them the thrill they crave, when those fake happy photos no longer get attention, and when their flowery words fail to mask the truth, the narcissist enters their most dangerous phase, ego collapse. This isn't just a passing emotional crisis. It's the breakdown of an entire psychological structure they've relied on since childhood, a structure built on other people's reactions, never on a true sense of self. All their lives, narcissists have never learned to define themselves independently. They grew up believing their worth could only be measured through someone else's eyes, through admiration, approval, or even fear. As long as you were there loving them, or even arguing with them, you gave them a sense of being real. But when you step off the stage, they realize they've been acting in a play with no audience. And then, the emptiness becomes an abyss. They start showing clear signs: disorientation, chronic anxiety, restless sleep, wild mood swings. Behind the forced smiles they post online are hollow eyes. They scramble for something to cling to: a new job, a new relationship, a new achievement, but it's like pouring water into a cracked vessel. The more they try to fill it, the more they realize there's nothing solid inside to hold on to. This is when many narcissists spiral into extreme behaviors, isolating themselves, abusing substances, or diving into reckless distractions just to escape reality for a while. But no matter what they do, one truth remains: they no longer recognize themselves. Not in the mirror, but in their mind. When they look inward, all they see is a dark, empty space where every role, every mask that once kept them afloat now lies useless. The irony is, this collapse didn't come from your hatred. It didn't come from revenge. It came from your peace. Because while they were scrambling for control, you found the freedom they'll never have. And that truth wounds them more deeply than any insult ever could. You don't need them to exist, while they've never learned how to exist without someone else. From here, they have only one path left, whether they realize it or not: accept reality and face their greatest fear, or keep falling into a cycle of self-destruction. And when they lack the strength to face it, they retreat to a familiar place, a suffocating silence. And that is the final stage, an ending without drama, leaving behind nothing but an echo of emptiness in their life. Stage 8, the quiet ending. After days of desperate resistance, after every attempt to hold on, manipulate, rage, and deceive, the narcissist finally faces a reality they never prepared for: a quiet ending. No drama, no final showdown, no tearful accusations or explosive arguments they secretly hoped for to keep their power game alive. Only silence, a void they can't endure, yet cannot change. They realize you're truly gone. Not the kind of disappearance that waits to be chased, but a departure wrapped in absolute peace. You're no longer trying to prove anything, no longer yearning to be understood. You don't need an apology. You don't crave their remorse. You don't look back, not out of hate, not out of revenge, but because you no longer see a reason to stay in a game you've already risen above. While you quietly rebuild your life, learning to love yourself and finding worth in inner peace, they remain trapped in the maze they created. They search for new people, new scripts, trying to rebuild the stage that once made them feel powerful. But it's all an exhausting loop, because deep down they know the truth hasn't changed. They lost the most precious thing they'll never admit, a person who saw their true self and stayed until they couldn't anymore. The irony is, even while they smear your name or craft a shiny new image for themselves, they're haunted by one question: how could you walk away so easily? What they don't understand is that it wasn't easy at all. You endured sleepless nights, endless self-doubt, and wounds that cut to the core of your heart. But the difference is you faced the pain. You chose to heal. You dared to let go of what no longer belonged to be you. And that, to them, is a victory they will never achieve. In the end, when the lights on their stage go dark, when the theater echoes only with their own footsteps, the narcissist faces what they fear most: silence without witnesses. No one to blame, no one to control, no one to mirror back the image they crave to believe in. Only an endless darkness where every role, every mask that once kept them alive now lies meaningless. This story doesn't close with a win or lose battle, but with two paths diverging completely. You walk away in the light of freedom, carrying lessons and new strength. They remain in the shadows of endless loops, performing a play with no audience. And if you ever doubt whether leaving was the right choice, remember this: you don't need applause to prove your worth. You don't need an apology to heal. Because the real victory isn't in their regret. The real victory is the peace in your soul when you know at last you've escaped a game you were never meant to play. There's one truth you need to remember: you don't need applause to prove your worth. You don't need someone to admit their mistakes for you to feel deserving. Everything you need, you've already found it: the peace within your soul. You've walked through the darkest days, hit rock bottom, and you stood back up, not because of their regret, not because of a perfect ending, but because you chose what was best for you, because you dared to let go of a game you were never meant to play. Remember this: real victory isn't making the narcissist fall to their knees and beg. It isn't proving you're so important they can't live without you. Real victory is when you look back, smile, and realize, I've broken free. I've found a freedom no one can ever take away. And if one day you doubt yourself, wondering if you made the right choice, just look at the peace you have now. That's your answer. That's the clearest proof you chose the right path. Thank you for staying with me in this video. If today's story spoke to you, if you saw yourself in these words, share your journey in the comments. Someone out there might need to hear your story to find their own strength. Don't forget to hit like if this brought you value, and subscribe for more content that heals, inspires, and helps you keep walking the path to inner freedom. Love yourself, never forget that. And until I see you in the next video, live true to who you are, because that's the freedom you deserve.